Good morning, Hasselt. How are we doing? I'm gonna energize you a little bit. I'm gonna ask you to raise hands. Who among you has already heard of Bitcoin? Please raise your hand. Okay, that's massive. Who among you already owns one or a piece of a Bitcoin? Please raise your hand. Okay, still a few. And who among you actually uses Bitcoin or similar cryptocurrencies on a day-to-day basis? On a day-to-day basis? Okay, but that's... What you just saw is about to change. I predict that in 15 years, people will use Bitcoin or Bitcoin-based technologies on a regular basis. And why are they going to use that technology? Here's why. Because of human rights. I should probably first introduce myself. My name is Thomas Spaas, and I'm an international tax lawyer. By night, I'm also one of the directors of the Belgian Bitcoin Association. And the thesis I'm defending today is that Bitcoin or Bitcoin-based technologies will break through because they offer a better way than before to protect our human rights. Now, okay, everybody has heard about human rights. I think everybody in the room agrees that all people have human rights. If you are against human rights, please raise your hand. Okay, no slaves for me today, unfortunately. But these human rights have been written down in many documents, in many versions throughout the ages. We find them in most constitutions of most countries. We find them in many international treaties concluded between states. I've chosen one version specifically to discuss these rights, and I'm going to focus on a particular subset of these rights, those rights that Bitcoin will protect in the future. Bitcoin evidently is not going to solve all world problems, but it will help in solving some. And I looked at many versions of these human rights, and for this talk I'm going to use the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 1948. Like I told you, there are many versions of this Declaration of Human Rights, but this document, this Universal Declaration, really had the specific aim of applying to all people of the entire planet. So, for the purposes of this talk, we're going to have a look at this Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Okay, without further ado, what's in this document? Okay, interesting. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. Okay, what does that mean? Well, you get these human rights automatically from the moment you were born as a human. Some people may point to a higher power, a God, that is the ultimate guarantee of these human rights. But the basic idea is that you don't get these rights from the local authorities. You don't go begging your ruler to have these rights granted to you. No, you get them from the moment you are born, and they shouldn't be taken away. We scroll a bit further down in the declaration, and what do we see here? Okay, now it becomes more concrete. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary interference with his privacy, family, home, or correspondence. That's the right to privacy. That's the right to keep your letters private. Another important right. Everyone has the right to freedom and of opinion and expression. That liberty we know as the freedom of speech, also very important. And lastly, and now we come closer to Bitcoin as it exists today, everyone has the right to own property. Already a bit more controversial, and that's why not all countries signed this Universal Declaration. But it is an important right. I believe it is. Now, these three rights that I just mentioned, privacy, freedom of speech, and the right to own property, those are the liberties, or at least those liberties Bitcoin will protect in the future. And Bitcoin could not have come at a better time, because today those liberties are under attack all over the world. Why are they under attack? Actually, there are many reasons, but I'm going to focus for this talk on one reason specifically. That is the danger of having too much centralization within our society and within our economy. Where do we see this excessive centralization? Well, let's go back to that Universal Declaration. I already mentioned a few rights, but actually there's another right that I didn't mention yet. That's the right to life, liberty, and security of person. And within the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it comes before all other rights, because this is the right not to get your head bashed in. This is the right not to be blown up. This is the right to remain safe from violence. So it's a very important right. And who do we look for to guarantee that right? We look to this guy, the state, the government. At its most basic level, government can be defined as a bunch of guys with guns that protect us from other guys with guns. At least that's what government is supposed to do. Now don't get me wrong, I am not against government. I am not advocating anarchy. I mean, without governments, we wouldn't have the pleasure of being taxed, and I, as a tax lawyer, would have no job. So I'm not against governments. Governments provide many useful functions, and one of these functions is to be a watchdog, to watch over the physical security of its persons, of its citizens. Now, the thing with watchdogs is you better keep them on a leash. If you don't supervise the supervisors, if you don't watch the watchdogs, you end up with the things that this guy revealed, Mr. Snowden, who revealed massive invasions of privacy all over the world because we weren't careful enough in watching the security agencies. This is just one example. Because if you remove checks and balances, you get excessive centralization and you get abuse of power. As everybody knows, all power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts absolutely. Of course, it's not only the government that makes mistakes, it's in the private sector as well. You may find it hard to believe, but there are companies that abuse the trust of their customers. Within my own profession, for example, there have been lawyers that ran away with their clients' money. I know it's hard to believe, but even within the legal profession, we have a few bad apples. On a larger scale, we have, for example, Bernie Madoff and other wolves of Wall Street. And this makes people angry and upset for a reason. Think about the Occupy Wall Street movement we had. Now, specifically looking at the financial sector, here we see the dangers of exaggerated centralization at work. Commentators from all over the political spectrum, they all agree that there are too few big banks and that they are too narrowly interlinked. And out of this dissatisfaction with the existing financial system grew Bitcoin, a currency, a way of payment that would exist outside of the existing banking and financial system. Now, we all know Bitcoin, the antics of the Bitcoin price have been all over the news in the last year. Here you see a graph that shows the evolution of the Bitcoin price over the last 6 months. And as you can tell, it's been quite a bumpy ride. But I am here to tell you today that the evolution of the price of Bitcoin is actually not the most important thing. Bitcoin will succeed if people are willing to pay something for a Bitcoin or to do something for a Bitcoin. If Bitcoin doesn't find no believers, the price will crash to zero. But there's something else about Bitcoin. The protocol on which Bitcoin is built, that's the most important thing. I'm not going to go into too much technical detail here. I am but a humble tax lawyer after all. But the most important to realize is that all functions that are necessary to guarantee the integrity of a financial system with Bitcoin have been distributed throughout the network. We don't have one bank, we don't have one government guaranteeing the system. Every participant does it. And I can best explain this with an analogy. In a few weeks, Belgians will go to the voting booth to vote in their general elections. And in most places, people will vote electronically. These votes are then gathered, and then they are sent to a central server in Brussels, and that will count all the votes and deliver the results. So we need to trust as citizens that that central server doesn't lie, doesn't count votes twice or changes the results. But what if, just try to imagine, that Belgians, or other voting citizens, for example, would use their own computers, their smartphones, their personal computers to have at home, to guarantee the integrity of the voting result. Instead of having one central server, we would have all computers you would have at home would be able to contribute a little bit to vote to counting the votes and to guarantee the integrity of the system. That is actually what Bitcoin is all about. Every 10 minutes, hundreds of thousands of computers vote on the current state of the system. So that's an answer to the question, who owns how many Bitcoins at this point in time? Every 10 minutes, hundreds of thousands of computers make that vote. And then the ledger, the accounting records that keep track of the coins, are updated. That's the way Bitcoin works. Now, that is the most important thing. Bitcoin as a currency may not survive if it doesn't find new believers. But the technology that Bitcoin is built on will survive. This decentralized voting method. And even if the currency disappears, that will at least have been the gift that Bitcoin has given us. And with that gift, we can use it to protect our human rights. Going back to the right to privacy, I'll explain what I'm talking about. Privacy. Email. Everybody knows email. Everybody knows that it's broken. Messages are clear text over the internet, and anyone can intercept and read those messages. And that happens all the time, even without a court order and so on. Actually, your regular mail has a much higher degree of privacy protection than you have with email. Based on the Bitcoin protocol, people have built BitMessage. That functions just like an email system, but where messages are absolutely encrypted. There are no central servers. No, every participant, every BitMessage client contributes to the privacy, to the confidentiality, and to the integrity of the messages. And only the intended receiver can actually read those messages. Anyone intercepting those messages only sees a bunch of unreadable code. Talking about the freedom of speech. Everybody knows Twitter. Twitter is a very important tool of mass communication today. Think about the role it played during the Arab Spring. Dictators worldwide are afraid of Twitter. And it is a useful tool, and they do their best to protect the privacy of their users. But Bitcoin also has, Twitter also has a few weak points. The servers can be blocked. The company Twitter can be pressured to reveal the identity of its users. So, based on the Bitcoin protocol, people built an alternative to Twitter, Twister, which sounds like the Aldi version of Twitter. But actually, it offers the same functionality, but in a way that guarantees the privacy of its users. There is no central server. All participants contribute to the integrity of the messages. Now, as you can tell, Twister, BitMessage, these are all things in their infancy, of course. So your mileage may vary, but they offer a shape of things to come. There you can see what people can build based on the Bitcoin protocol. And now it gets even more interesting about property rights. Here in our Western world, if we want to guarantee our property rights, we have many institutions for that. When it's about real estate, we go to a notary if we want to sell a house. The notary checks that everything's okay. If we have a patent, we go to a patent office to have our patent protected, and so on. But it's not true in all countries in the world, and maybe also in our countries there could be better systems. And these could also be based on Bitcoin, where we track ownership in a decentralized manner. What are some possible applications? You get voting rights that I just talked about earlier. We could issue financial instruments with Bitcoin. Domain names. Today, domain names on the internet can be blocked. Think of, for example, the Pirate Bay that's blocked in Belgium. Well, domain names can also be kept in a decentralized record that cannot be blocked. Patents can not only be kept at the patent office, but record of that patent can also be kept in a Bitcoin-like system. File storage in the cloud. Today we use the well-known services, Dropbox, Google Drive, and so on, but these are still files on centrally located servers. We could have our entire file storage decentralized, so we would have a real cloud, where everybody would keep a little bit of each other's files on each other's computer, so the network would not be able to be shut down. Professional degrees, very important for students. Accounting records in general, ID records. You could do a crowdfunding through Bitcoin or similar virtual currencies. Contracts, also very important. You could create automatic contracts within the Bitcoin system. Right now, if we give somebody a loan and we expect interest, we need to rely on judges and similar to help us when that other person doesn't execute, doesn't perform the contract. Well, we could automate it, thanks to Bitcoin. Land titles, we could make microloans, micropayments, we could put company bylaws within the blockchain, and so on. Micro-donations as well. Bitcoin and similar currencies are often used today for charity. There's an entire homeless shelter in the US that runs on Bitcoin, even today. And then I come to the end of my talk. What should you take away from this? First of all, Bitcoin is not only a currency that may fail or may succeed, it is first and foremost a communication protocol. A communication protocol that removes the need for centrally trusted parties. We all guarantee the integrity of the network. That communication protocol will be used to help further our human rights. Thanks to Bitcoin, we are more empowered as persons. Thank you very much.